Yes. 1600.
Hi Diego, hi everybody on our stream. Welcome to Monday, April 16th, our Fox 5 live stream for today. We're live in the newsroom here at Fox 5 DC, bringing you the latest, and it is a rainy, pretty cold day here in DC. In fact, so much so that a couple of our satellite cameras are down due to the weather. We're dealing with that inclement weather, unfortunately, but a lot of news stories to kind of bring you today. Some of the top stories from the weekend breaking. James Comey releases his tell-all book tonight. It's released at 11:30 p.m. at Kramer Books here in DC, and then of course across the nation. A Higher Loyalty is the name of it. People are anticipating this for his comments on the president, of course, and his exclusive interview with George Stephanopoulos. We have a little clip of that in one of our packages that we're going to show you later on. But also today, guys, so lest we not forget, this is the anniversary of the Virginia Tech tragedy 11 years ago. Pretty hard to believe this was 11 years ago. And this picture brought to you by our photojournalist here at Fox 5, Joe Spivak. He took it when he was covering this tragedy 11 years ago. Really hard to believe. Beautiful sort of remembrance of the 32 who died in this shooting there on campus in Blacksburg, Virginia. He's actually in the newsroom now, but I haven't been able to track him down to kind of give us his insight on what that was like to cover. But he does have some pretty compelling photographs from that day that he went down there to cover it. He went down with a few of our reporters actually 11 years ago today. So remembering Virginia Tech on this day, on this anniversary. And we're going to go over to some of, hey Diego, glad to have you from Argentina. Thanks for watching us internationally. We are, like I mentioned, here in the nation's capital. Very excited to be with you on this Monday. Tax day is tomorrow. Make sure you get them done, guys, or at least file an extension. It's due tomorrow. They gave you that 2-day reprieve because the 15th fell on a Sunday. So everyone's kind of looking to that. And speaking of that, President Trump talks tax cuts and taxes in Florida today. He's hosting a roundtable with small businesses, and we're going to have that live for you coming up in the 12 o'clock hour. But for now, let's take a look at some of the top stories that we've been watching on this day, including Barbara Bush and her failing health, unfortunately, 92 years old. Jenna Bush Hager was on the Today Show this morning, emotionally talking about her grandparents and what they're going through as a family right now. And also, James Comey, of course, releasing his tell-all book coming up later tonight, and some of the deadly severe weather that we've been seeing across our nation. Here's a look at some of the top stories, guys.
Failing health. The 92-year-old was admitted to the hospital last week. She's recently suffered from congestive heart failure, among other illnesses. Bush has refused further medical treatment and is back at home in Texas with her family. Her focus now is on comfort care.
We're rooting for you to get better, Mrs. Bush, and we know you will because we're all behind you.
Vice President Mike Pence writing on Twitter this weekend, Karen and I are praying for Barbara Bush and the entire Bush family tonight.
She's an example. She's been an example, and she's continuing to be during this period of decline. Everybody faces that, and some people do it gracefully. She's one of them.
Bush's health has been on the minds of visitors to the Smithsonian Museum of American History. An exhibit dedicated to First Ladies includes the dress she wore to her husband's 1989 inauguration. There's even video from that day nearly 30 years ago.
I remember she was quite a force behind the Bush men, and I think they looked up to her for a lot.
She campaigned for her son, Jeb Bush, in the 2016 presidential race. The former first couple did the coin toss for last year's Super Bowl. First Lady historian Andrew Oak is hoping to see more of Barbara Bush in the years to come.
She's a very strong lady with a strong will, and I think if anyone can conquer any type of ailment and health issue, I think it's Barbara Bush.
Barbara Bush is the only living wife of one former president and the mother of another former president. In New York, Kelly Wright, Fox News.
I don't know whether the current president of the United States was with prostitutes peeing on each other in Moscow.
Fired FBI Director James Comey Sunday, appearing on network TV to promote his new book, A Higher Loyalty. It hits the shelves on Tuesday. In it, Comey talking about the Steele dossier, an unverified document funded by Trump's opponents, which detailed an alleged encounter between President Trump and several prostitutes at a Moscow hotel.
Did you tell him that the Steele dossier had been financed by his political opponents?
It wasn't necessary for my goal, which was to alert him that we had this information.
In one of many tweets fired off Sunday morning, President Trump criticized Comey about reopening the investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server days before the election.
That she's going to be elected president, and if I hide this from the American people, she'll be illegitimate the moment she's elected.
Trump tweeting in part, in other words, he was making decisions based on the fact he thought she was going to win and he wanted a job. Slimeball. The online attacks coming as the White House and the Republican National Committee joined forces to discredit the former FBI chief.
The American people see right through the blatant lies of a self-admitted leaker. This is nothing more than a poorly executed PR stunt by Comey.
Comey is expected to make several TV and radio appearances in the week ahead, as a new ABC Washington Post poll says that 48% of Americans find Comey to be more believable than President Trump. In Los Angeles, Anita Vogel, Fox News.
The president's lawyer is going up against the feds. Michael Cohen, the personal attorney for President Trump, is asking a judge to issue a temporary restraining order, claiming some of the documents seized by the FBI during raids of his office, apartment, and hotel room are protected by attorney-client privilege. The raids, reportedly prompted by payments made to Stormy Daniels, a former porn actress who claims she had an affair with President Trump before he took office. Her lawyer was at the hearing as well, asking the judge to make the materials public.
Above all else, we want to make sure that the integrity of the documents that were seized is maintained. We don't want documents disappearing or being destroyed under any circumstances.
Prosecutors say the materials are all fair game, and certain confidentiality rules can be set aside if evidence exists that a crime has been committed. But President Trump is calling the raids and the investigation a witch hunt and, quote, an attack on our country. His supporters say it's proof there are elements of the Justice Department looking to damage the president.
There's a lot of confusion within the DOJ and within that investigation. I think they better get their act together, because it is the American people are starting to wake up to the ridiculousness.
Severe weather across the country is blamed for several deaths, among them a 2-year-old Louisiana girl. Carly Ortiz was sleeping inside her family's RV when a large tree came crashing down, tearing the mobile home in half. Neighbors heard the father calling for help and knew something awful had happened.
When we heard him screaming, we knew it was a kid. We knew it was the baby. And he was screaming and yelling.
People were harmed when an F2 tornado ripped through central Arkansas. At least a half dozen people were taken to the hospital for various injuries. More than 150 structures were damaged, mostly homes and the University of Central Arkansas.
It could have been worse, like the building could have got torn down or so, but we're able to be alive today, so thank God.
Governor Asa Hutchinson toured the affected areas, praising officials for issuing warnings and residents for listening.
People take it seriously, some more than others, and those that did not take it seriously, I think will do next time.
A tornado in North Carolina is blamed for tens of thousands of power outages. Resident James Bullard captured the dark funnel cloud swirling over Greensboro. The South is clearing up. The Midwest is digging out. Nearly 2 feet of snow fell in Minnesota. forcing flight cancellations and stranding travelers in Minneapolis and Duluth. North of Milwaukee, a carport collapsed, crushing at least 6 vehicles, shattering windshields and leading to a buildup of snow inside the cars. A little up the road, the roof of an Econo Lodge also caved in. Pieces started crumbling onto swimmers using the indoor pool. The severe weather forced officials to postpone 6 Major League Baseball games on Sunday, something that has not happened in almost 10 years. In New York, Chris DeMeo, Fox News.
A massive rally held on Monday in Damascus. Thousands packing the Syrian capital to show support for President Bashar al-Assad and the Syrian military, following the latest round of U.S.-led airstrikes. The rally coming as Assad's forces make a big push against rebels in the Damascus suburbs.
What has happened will unfortunately do nothing to impede or deter Assad's use of traditional weaponry, including barrel bombs.
President Trump says the airstrikes were a complete success, but at home opinion remains divided. Anti-war protesters are calling for an end to the U.S. military intervention in Syria, while many Syrian Americans want to see the Trump administration do more to help the rebels.
And war is big business. We understand this system has different priorities. The priorities are not the people.
A year had passed with more innocent lives lost, more bloodshed.
The airstrikes were prompted by a chemical attack that killed dozens. Washington says Moscow is partly to blame because of its longtime support for the Assad regime. And on Monday, the White House unveiling a new round of sanctions aimed at Russian companies who provided assistance to Syria's chemical weapons program.
We've seen a series of Russian lies at the United Nations and through their disinformation campaigns for many years now.
International weapons experts have arrived in Syria to investigate the reported chemical weapons attack, but it is uncertain whether or not they will be granted access to the site along the Israel-Syria border. David Lee Miller, Fox News.
People spending big bucks on these tickets, plus hotel stay and plane tickets, just to find out it's all a scam.
There was no sign that anything like this would ever happen.
Nika Logvanova bought her Coachella Weekend 1 ticket through Ticket Expert back in September. She has this confirmation email to prove it, signed HTD Tix, with instructions to pick up the ticket at Fantasy Springs Casino in Indio Friday morning.
So we got there and there were already a couple people and they all looked really confused. There wasn't anyone who had our tickets. Someone from the hotel came down and they said that the man who had our tickets had checked out yesterday and that he was gone.
The seller no longer replying to emails and the HTD Tix customer service line not picking up when we called this morning.
No one is available to take your call at this time. If you'd like to leave a message in the general delivery mailbox, please do so now.
$700 short and out a Coachella ticket. Logvanova is hoping to get the word out before others fall victim to the scam.
This is just for Weekend 1. I'm assuming that there's definitely more people for Weekend 2 that have purchased tickets from him that are going to be in the same situation.
Like Gracie Kelly, who bought her Coachella Weekend 2 ticket from the same site and got tangled in a very similar situation.
Some man who was in charge of everyone's tickets just disappeared, and he canceled some hotel reservation and he just disappeared out of like thin air.
With bags packed and a non-refundable plane ticket from Oregon, she's headed to the Valley next weekend, but likely won't be attending Coachella.
I guess just hang out and maybe something good will happen. I don't know. We'll find out.
If you're going to go somewhere, you know, buy the tickets from the actual website, not some third party, unless it's like StubHub or something. That way, even if it's a little bit more, you're guaranteed a ticket. You don't have to go through all this. You actually can go to your venue.
Indio PD is urging anyone who believes they've fallen victim to the scam to file a report. You could find a link to that on our website. Reporting in La Quinta, I'm Lauren Coronado.
Rory Dolan himself. That is what we're doing, and this is who we're doing it for. I want to bring in my friend Pat. Pat and I had a chance to sit down earlier today. Pat, how does this feel to have everybody here for you?
It's unbelievable.
We first met Pat Quinn on August 1st, 2014.
After we did it with you and with Fox,
At Rory's and Yonkers, it was just incredible, the response. It just kept getting bigger and bigger.
A year later, it was clear ALS was affecting his everyday.
Oh, thank you.
Now the 35-year-old can no longer walk, use his hands, or speak. Pat was only able to communicate through a robotic computer voice.
This voice sucks.
But he was determined to get it back. The ALS Association teamed up with voice banking technology company Lyrebird.
The unique thing about Pat's case was that he didn't actually have any recordings for this program to work with, so we had to use what was there, which was speeches and interviews that he did about ALS.
I need your support. And days like today make me the fighter I am.
Crazy day when you hear your voice again. I never thought I would hear it again.
Ryan Friedrich with the ALS Association told us in a Skype interview after watching Pat's success, the association launched Project Revoice, which will allow the 20,000 people living in the United States with ALS to save their voices.
We're hoping to roll out the voice banking feature within the next few weeks, and we'll send an email out to everyone who registers and let them know that they can start voice banking and recording their voice. We're saying by the end of the year. We hope it's sooner. But
all this time, Pat has given the ALS community a voice, and now he has his own.
Every patient getting diagnosed now will have the opportunity to save their voice. It will change lives.
In Yonkers, Liz Dahlem, Fox 5 News.
I wish people would use it more because I think it's a very attractive note.
Banknote engraving historian and American Numismatic Society trustee Mark Tomasco met us on this sunny 42nd anniversary of the reintroduction of the $2 bill to praise both the aesthetics and functionality of that note and strike down rumors of its demise.
I have one at home in my drawer that I've had for about 20 years.
When I was younger. Not in years.
I have one that I hold. It used to be my mother's, actually.
Americans treasure their $2 bills because we seem to believe they no longer circulate, or they now carry some additional monetary worth.
I know it's worth two $1 bills.
Or the feds no longer print them, or we can no longer withdraw them.
It's fun to try and use them, and I do on occasion. I get interesting reactions.
But Tomasco reminds us more than $1 billion of $2 notes circulate today. The feds still print new ones, and if you want some $2 bills, go to a bank, any bank, and ask.
$2 bill as a denomination goes back to the early 19th century.
When the federal government only issued coins and state-chartered banks produced all of this nation's paper money, Americans also carried $3 bills. Then the Civil War wiped out and reissued all U.S. currency, and the feds started issuing notes.
The legal tender notes of 1862 were the first $2 bills in federal currency.
And those, displaying Thomas Jefferson and his Monticello home, remained in circulation until the early 1960s. The United States then brought back the $2 note on April 13th, 1976, for this nation's bicentennial.
To return one of the more historic denominations of U.S. currency.
Dating back to 1817, the painting engraved on the back of the $2 bill represents the oldest engraving on any piece of U.S. currency in circulation today.
The portraits on U.S. currency are very well done. I like them all.
On the Upper East Side, I'm Matt King, Fox 5 News.
How cool is that? A little history lesson on your $2 bills. I can't say I knew all that information, but I do keep my 1976 series $2 bill in my wallet at all times, and I have done that for like 15 years or so. I don't know, someone told me it was good luck once, so I continue to do that. But guys, let's bring it back into DC. Another animal story out of DC, check it out. This is a baby gorilla that was born in the National Zoo this weekend. Baby boy on Sunday. Little guy is named Moki, which means junior or little one in Lingala, which is the language spoken in the Congo. Cool little story there. That's right back at home here. Cute little nurturing of the baby gorilla there in our Smithsonian Zoo. Still, guys, we're having a little trouble with our satellites due to the weather, so we're going to pop it over to the live Eagle Cam in the Anacostia. They weathered the storm this weekend. Check out what it's looking like there, and we'll be back with you for more live news as we get it in the noon hour, including President Trump. He's flying down to Florida. I believe he already did that, actually, and he'll be speaking in the next 30 minutes or so to that roundtable, which we should hopefully get in live for you. All right, we'll check in with you then, guys.
GM Financial.
All right, guys, we'll have that Eagle cam up for you here and there throughout our stream today. We want to thank you for joining us in the newsroom for our live stream on this Monday, April 16th. Let's go down to Florida. Tax reform, that's the topic today for President Trump. He is just now landing in South Florida, and you can see here there's Air Force One on the tarmac. A good amount of crowd there to greet him. He was scheduled to land around noon, which he did just about 10 minutes ago. He'll be speaking to small businesses and about small businesses and tax reform coming up very shortly. We'll make sure we can grab some of that live as much as we can. He is joined by Labor Secretary Jim Acosta and Alex Acosta, rather, and Treasury Secretary Mnuchin. And here they are. They're focusing in on this landing. So we'll take this all in and enjoy it live, guys. This is in South Florida. President Trump also plans to travel to Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach. After this, he'll be hosting Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe over in Palm Beach. Unfortunately, guys, we just lost that signal for the camera down in Florida, but I want to bring you back to that photo that we were showing you earlier of Virginia Tech. This was taken by our photojournalist, Joe Spivak, who is actually here in the newsroom today, but unfortunately wasn't able to come over to comment on his experience 11 years ago. But we remember 11 years ago, this memorial, obviously 32 dead, 32 remembered, and it's hard to believe that it really is 11 years later. I'm curious if any of you have any stories surrounding this or remember that day, if you remember where you were, and sort of reflecting back on it, what you think of it. This was actually taken a couple days after the tragedy. And you know, he was down there, he raced down there with a couple of our reporters to cover this news item, this really unspeakable tragedy. And I remember being in college at the time and exactly what happened during that class that I was in on that day in 2007. So we do remember that event today, and we'll try to get some more insight from our photojournalist who was there on the scene during that event. Let's go back though, because we do have a camera inside that round table in Florida today where President Trump will be speaking. He was just whisked away from that tarmac where Air Force One landed, and this is a look inside that room in South Florida. So we're going to take you in there, and we'll hear from President Trump on tax reform and how small businesses will be affected specifically due to his new law that changes a lot of stuff for next year's taxes. So we're going to take a look inside here, and thanks for staying with us, guys.
Check 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3. Check 1 2 3 4. Check 1 2 3 4. Check 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3 4. Check. 1 2 3 4. Check. Test 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3. Check 1 2 3 4. Check 1 2 3 4. Yep. Test 1 2 3 4. Just sitting in the right channel. Check 1 2 3.
Just one channel.
Check 1 2 3.
He just wants to see it on camera. Check 1 2. Test 1 2 3 4. 1 2 3. Check. Mic check. Copy? Do you copy? 1 2 3. 1 2 3.
Ladies
How
and
was that?
gentlemen, the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, Detroit down to Houston.
Oh, what a group. What a group. These are my friends. These are great friends. And we have great friends right here. So thank you very much, everybody. We really appreciate it. We've made tremendous progress in our country. We're working on new trade deals that are going to be great deals. We're, as you know, very tough on Cuba. Not fair what happened. We're tough. But this is our, we're going to celebrate a little bit. I love it behind us. You want to say open for business. Whose idea was that? And it is. It's open for business. We're doing tremendously. Companies are moving back into our country. We have billions of dollars and even trillions of dollars going to be coming back in. Already started Apple, $350 billion investment in really a new campus, beautiful, beautiful campus and plants. And I've always wanted that. So many of the companies are bringing back their money. They're putting it to work. Chrysler's opening up a big, beautiful plant in Michigan, and so many other car companies. And it's a whole different story. They all want to be part of it. And I want to thank Senator Rubio. He's been a great friend. Great. And Mario, I want to thank you. You have, right from day one, thank you. And our Secretary of the Treasury, he's right there, and our Secretary of Labor. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Steve. Great choices. Not all of my choices were good, but they were great ones. Tomorrow's tax day, and we're going to hear from everybody and we have heard from so many people. They're so thrilled. And remember this is the last time you're going to fill up that long, complicated, horrible return. I would say that some of these companies that do all that work on getting a lot of money for doing your tax returns, they're not going to be too happy with us, but that's about the only business that won't be. So tomorrow, last day, very importantly, next year it's going to be a simple, for the most part, one page. It may get a little bit bigger, but it'll be simple and easy to do. And very importantly, you're going to have a lot of money left over from what you have. And we didn't get one Democrat to vote for us, and Senator Nelson was hostile to it. And let me tell you, if for any reason they get in, meaning the Democrats, they're going to raise your taxes way up high, they're going to terminate this out. Of course, I'll veto it, that's all right, but eventually they want to terminate, and they want to raise your taxes. And we cannot let that happen, because this country is starting to rock with our businesses coming back in. It's starting to really rock. So we've had massive tax cuts, and I mean massive. We've had tremendous success from the company standpoint and from the people standpoint. They're going out, they have a lot more money to spend. And, you know, something happened that we didn't even expect. Nobody talked about it. When we first had it passed, it started with, well, AT&T. We might as well give them credit. But they gave $1,000 bonuses to their employees, and that's a lot of employees. Then all of a sudden, other companies came along, and now you have all of the big, so many of the big companies, they've given bonuses to the people that work for the companies. That was unexpected. Nobody thought that was going to happen. And most importantly, we waited till February 1st, and you see what's happened to your wallet. You're getting a lot more money in your weekly or monthly checks than you ever thought possible. So people are really liking it, and very importantly, it's great for the country. Our taxes were the highest, or among the highest, but just about, I would say, Marco, they were the highest in the world from a business standpoint. That's why businesses were leaving. Now, they're not the lowest, but they're on the low side, and businesses are pouring back into the United States, and that means jobs. That means jobs. So we've created, since Election Day, that beautiful, beautiful day, was that a great day? That was a beautiful day. Mario was saying we got a big, big percentage vote over here, didn't we? Huh? We got a big percentage vote. But since Election Day, we've created 3 million new jobs. 3 million. And people, if I would have said that prior to the election, that we'll create in a short period of time 3 million jobs, they would have said, that's ridiculous, that's an exaggeration, how can it be possible? We would have taken a lot of heat. But we've created 3 million new jobs, and now the number is even higher than that. So since Election Day, 3 million new jobs. Unemployment rates for Hispanics. Are there any Hispanics in the room? No, I don't. For Hispanics, we have the lowest level ever recorded. In other words, you have more employment. Now think of it, lowest level employment rates. For African Americans, the lowest level ever recorded. And I'm really proud of that. Unemployment for women, lowest level in 18 years. Women out there. So that means if you're a woman and Hispanic or a woman and African American, you're really doing well, right? That means you're really doing well. Remember when I used to say that I used to take heat for it, what do you have to lose? I'd say, what do you have to lose? Every once in a while I'd say, if it was a rambunctious stadium or something, I'd say, what the hell do you have to lose, right? And I get criticized by those people, the fake media back there. Fake media. No, I'd get criticized for using the word hell. I say, I've heard a heck of a lot worse than that. But the economy, Larry Kudlow's here someplace. Where's Larry? Larry Kudlow. Where's Larry? Come on, Larry, stand up. He just gave me a number. He said the economy is entering the greatest boom in many decades. In other words, it's now at the early phase. Would you say that, Larry? Of the earliest and greatest. This could be one of the greatest booms ever. I think it will be, actually, because the companies are so strong and they're ready to rock. What do you think, Larry? Good, I thought you were going to say that. Could you imagine if he didn't? Could you imagine if he said, no, I disagree with that? Right. Everybody's going to benefit, he said. That's right. And very importantly, and by the way, John Bolton is here, and we just had a big, successful hit. John. So I think John, that's pretty good. I didn't expect that. I'm a little jealous. Are you giving him all the credit? That's. Uh-oh, you know that means the end of his job, you know. He did. Did he do it? Did our generals do a great job? Did our military do a great job? Right? Thank you. And you know, with way over 100 missiles shot in, they didn't shoot one down. The equipment didn't work too well, their equipment, and they didn't shoot one. You know, you heard, oh, they shot 40 down, then they shot 15 down. They watched. Then I called, I said, did they? No, sir. Every single one hit its target. Think of that. How genius. Not one was shot. So we have the biggest tax cut in history, bigger than the Reagan tax cut, bigger than any tax cut. But what else? The individual mandate is gone. That's on Obamacare, which is about the end of Obamacare. So we had Obamacare beat, then one senator decided to go thumbs down. Do you remember that evening? Do you remember that? No, nobody remembers. Thumbs down here. It's all right. Because Alex Acosta has come up, and you know, this is a plan that a lot of people have wanted for a long time, associations, and we're going to have tremendous signups. And Alex, when is that, tell me if you could, when is that going to be ready where people can actually start signing and doing it in groups and through cooperatives, et cetera?
That's right, Mr. President. We hope to have that by this summer.
It's going to be incredible. You're going to get tremendous insurance at a very low cost. So the individual mandate is dead. Anwar is up. That's the big energy that nobody thought. You know, it's funny. I didn't want to do it. I said, no, let's not do that. And then a person called up who I have a lot of respect for in the energy business. He said, is it true that you're going to get Anwar as part of your tax cut plan? You know, they put a lot of things in. So we had the individual mandate. We have Anwar. I said, yeah, it's true. Tell me about it, because I'm not inclined to do it. I said, for a very specific reason. He said, well, I tell you, it's pretty amazing. He didn't benefit by it, but he said, they've been trying to get this passed since Ronald Reagan. Nobody could get it done. No president could get it done. Nobody. It's impossible. It's perhaps the biggest, the best in the world in terms of energy, in terms of a field. He said, nobody's been able to get it done. As soon as I heard that, I called up. I said, put that back in the bill quickly. Right? And we got it done. Marco, we got it done. That was a big deal. And that's a lot of jobs in Alaska. That's a lot of jobs. So, just another thing, because, you know, the tax cut is massive, and not since Reagan. but this is bigger. You look at the whole bill, it's bigger than anything ever passed. But very importantly, and that's a tremendous asset to our country, but we did another thing that people don't talk about much. We cut regulations at a level that nobody's seen in the history of our country, more than any other president. So I'm here 15, 16 months, and we've cut more regulations than any president, whether it's 4 years, 8 years, or in one case, 16 years. Nobody's even close. And we're not finished yet. Where roads and highways would take 17, 18 years to get a permit or not even get approved. You know, the worst is they go out 17 years and then they'd vote it down. We're looking to get it down to 2 years and maybe even 1 year. And maybe get rejected. You know, nobody's going to say it's not going to get, maybe it gets rejected, but if it does, it's going to get rejected quickly. You're not going to take an entire lifetime to get something approved, and then all of a sudden you find out, and I've had projects, it took years and years, and then you go, fortunately, they got approved. But I've had projects that took 4, 5, 6 years to get approved, big building projects, and I said to myself, going into the final approvals, I said, you know, if these 5 people don't vote for it, I've wasted millions and millions of dollars, and I've wasted 5 or 6 years of my life trying to get a project approved. It's not right. You know if something's good, if it's good, and if it's going to get approved. So we have the biggest regulation cut, and I'm not so sure that the regulation cut, Marco, isn't even more important than this massive tax cut, but it's right up there, and we're continuing to go. So we think that things that would take sometimes 2 decades to get approved can be done in 2 years and even 1 year. And again, if they're not environmentally good, if they're not safe, if it's not great for our water and our air and all of the things that we watch and we think are so important, we're not going to approve it. But we're going to have fast approvals. We have many, many jobs that started now that would never start if the other administration came in. And that's why you see the job numbers the way they are. The job numbers are through the roof, and the training numbers are through the roof. And you see it. And they don't talk about regulation much. I think it's as important as the big, massive tax cut. So I just want to let you know that. Business and consumer confidence in our country is at an all-time high. Larry just gave me the numbers, and there's nothing close. So we're at an all-time high. And the tax cuts for a family, let's talk about just families now, because number one, the jobs, you have choice. You know, we're creating choice for our great veterans, all right? Choice. This is a different kind of choice. So this is a different kind of choice. This is choice for a job. In the past, jobs, we weren't doing great, and you'd have one job and you'd hold on. You really have choice. People are hiring, and wages for the first time in 18 years are going up, because I used to make the speeches. I came down here and made one. Wages were stagnant and even going down. People made more money 18 years ago, and today they're working 2 and 3 jobs. First time in 18 years where wages are going up. Congratulations. Enjoy your money. Congratulations. So today, we're joined by Florida business owners and workers who are experiencing the incredible results of the tax cuts, and I'd like to invite each of you to share some of your stories. If we can start, let's start right at the end of the table.
Thank you, Mr. President.
You look like a very prosperous guy, I have to say.
Trying to be. My name is Alberto Bello. I'm of Cuban-American descent, born and raised in Hialeah, Florida, and very proud of that. Thank you. My family history in trucking goes back to days since 1972. My father opened Palmetto Transport in 1992, and I was successful enough and happy enough to take the company over in 2004. Due to the surging economy we have now in South Florida and to the tax reform, I've been able to invest in newer technology, been able to buy more equipment, and hire more employees for my business. And Mr. President, I just want to say thank you for making America great again.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Marco, you have been such a help. I'd like you to say a few words before we go next.
Thank you, Mr. President. Being here, I think it'd be remiss if I first didn't thank you for being a champion for the cause of freedom and democracy in this hemisphere. That was very clear this weekend with the Vice President's presence at the Summit of the Americas, whether it's on Cuba or on Venezuela. The United States has led the way on fighting for freedom. And I want to thank you for John Bolton, because I said the day that he was hired was a bad day for Maduro and Castro and a great day for the cause of freedom in the city. And I want to thank you for fighting for the American worker, because behind all these businesses, they're going to be the first ones to tell you is the American worker. The American worker has been forgotten for far too long. The people that put in 8, 10, 12 hours a day, 6, 7 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week. There's dignity. Work isn't just about money. It's about the dignity that comes with work. And they've been beat up and ignored for far too long, whether it's taxes, whether it's jobs sent to other countries. This tax reform is about them, but you're doing something else that's very important. You're finally doing what I wish previous administrations have done. You are taking on the cheating and the stealing the Chinese have committed against our economy for the better part of 30 years. And finally, I want to thank you as well for the child tax credit. Millions of parents across this country will have more money in their pocket come tax time next year because of your leadership and of your work. And if I may, for 15 seconds, because a lot of those people covering this do so in Spanish, rather than let them use an interpreter, can I just say something to them? So, quiero darte las gracias, señor presidente, por ser un campeón a favor de la democracia y la libertad en este hemisferio, a favor de la libertad del pueblo de Cuba y del pueblo de Venezuela.
So I was going to ask, is he better in English or Spanish? But they didn't stand for the English and they stood for the Spanish. So I don't have to ask the question. That's very good, actually.
I just said they saved a bunch of money by switching to Geico.
That's good. Very good. Thank you, Marco, very much. We appreciate it. And, you know, Doral, right down the road. I own it. Surrounded. I don't think about it anymore, I will tell you. Surrounded by Venezuelans, as you know. A lot of Venezuelans. Those are great, great people. And we are working very hard on the Venezuelan horror show that's happening. And I think you see that, I think you know that. But I got to know the Venezuelan people because so many of them are in that area, the Doral area. And I will tell you, these are great people. So between Cuba and Venezuela, and really, hopefully every place else, you are very well represented. So thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. So go ahead. Thank you, darling. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. My name is Dr. Patricia Junquera. I was born in Cuba, October 27, 1948, and came to this country in 1967. Since 1984, I have practiced dentistry in Miami-Dade County. For my business and my practice, the tax law that was passed on December 2017 has brought improvement to the practice, like we were able to buy new and last generation equipment. My office, Junquera Family Dentistry, includes a large facility with 8 dental units. It's a small corporation where our clinic has 4 dentists and 14 employees, and all of them have beneficiated from this law. Secretaries, hygienists, assistants have all received bonuses, also an increment on their. Due to the changes in that tax policies, we plan to open more positions in the front office and as a hygienist. It is a pleasure to have you here with us, and I am glad that you are taking action to make America truly great again.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Beautiful, beautiful job. So I know Maximo, and you built a great company. And now it's become, you just said, even greater. So go ahead, let us know. How many more people you're hiring?
Well, number one, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Maximo.
It's really overwhelming a feeling to think that almost 60 years ago, at age 13, I arrived in this great country of ours, and that one day, 60 days later, I was going to be next to Marco Rubio, our greatest senator, and one of the best presidents, perhaps the best president. Thank you. My name is Maximo Alvarez. Most of you people know me as Max. I said this before, I'm a Pedro Pan. I was one of over 14,000 children that came from Cuba without parents. And lo and behold, I happened to arrive at the finest, most generous country in the world. And my notes look similar to the president, believe it or not. He's got just notes just like this, so just really, because we talk from our hearts, so we don't have to read very much to tell you our little story. The story of many, many millions of people who come to this country to look for an opportunity. And our president has now restored the capacity of people like me that started a business from the trunk of our cars to become a very prominent company where we impact over 40,000 families. And thank you, Mr. President. I'm very happy that right before he was elected, we had a town hall meeting, and I took the liberty of electing him. I said, we're going to elect you in November, and we're going to see you soon. My God, I look prophetic today. Just to give you an idea about the impact of the tax laws passed by Mr. Trump, our president, who, by the way, didn't get everything that he wanted, but still we settled for it, because he has to deal with some people who still do not understand what really makes America great, but I'm pretty sure in time they will. But just to give you an idea, my company, who runs and or supplies over 400 gas stations in the South Florida area, we have hired over 40 people that definitely we have not been able to hire if not for these tax cuts that allow us to have the extra income to do this. For example, something very simple. The fact that we can now write off the equipment that would now normally would have taken us 10, 15 years to write it off. Now we can do it immediately. Imagine how many businesses that produces, how many families are working, how many people need to install that equipment, and so on and so forth. So thank you, Mr. President, because it's not only the tax laws, it's the regulations, the ridiculous regulations that we had that prevented people to do what I did 31 years ago, starting a company with nothing and became a very prominent company. And this is the only country in the world that you can do this. And I hate to get emotional, but I happen to be in the petroleum industry. And of course, we're supposed to be bad people because we damage the environment, when in essence, we probably protect the environment more than anybody else. And it was this president that allowed the construction of the Keystone Pipeline, which will then, believe it or not, will provide cheaper oil, cheaper fuel to all of us. And it was Mr. Donald Trump, our president, who made that happen immediately. As a typical Latin person, I must stop now because they told me only 1 or 2 minutes. I could be here for the rest of the day. I just want to tell you that those of us who have been successful are now an example of all our children to follow in our footsteps. And I challenge my colleagues to understand that if I gave everything that I have today, it would only be 10% of what I was given when I came to this country of ours. Thank you for On a side note, he owns Doral. I live it because I've been at Doral since 1988. Thank you very much. Where he took something that was run down, that it was absolutely third world country, and made it into the nicest place that we have in South Florida. Thank you very much. And that's on the side note.
Actually, he was much quicker than I thought, okay? So, Irina, you have a great story. Please.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. President. Thank you for allowing me to be here with you today. It is a great honor.
Thank you.
My name is Irina Vilariño. My family and I arrived in 1980 during the Mariel Exodus. We brought nothing with us, only the clothes we were wearing. However, we didn't come here for a handout. We came here because this was the promised land, a country that promised political stability, respect of law, opportunity, and freedom. In 1984, we opened our first restaurant in South Florida, Las Vegas Cuban Cuisine. Today, we operate 15 units, including La Casita, Cuba, and Miami International Airport. Thank you. And we employ over 400 employees in South Florida. We were hit hard during the last administration's tax hike and are most grateful for your Tax and Jobs Reform Act. It allows us to keep more of our hard-worked earnings, allowing us to reinvest in better and new operations, thereby creating more jobs. I personally think it's better for the country than studying tadpoles in some dry river down in California. Thank you. Government helps small businesses by letting us do our jobs and getting out of the way, by unleashing the American spirit. Your incentives have created huge demand in the labor market. So, therefore, in order to retain and hire new employees, our hourly employees have seen an approximate wage increase of about 20% in this short time period. People are earning more, and therefore, this gives them confidence to go out and spend more, a win-win for everyone. On a personal note, I'd like to say that I've been a supporter from day one. You announced your candidacy, and I have Facebook to prove it.
Good.
Having come from a country that promised everything and only delivered misery, I knew that 8 years of promoting appeasement, apologies, and entitlement was taking us down a path of no return. Lastly, I leave you with a thought from a great Cuban thinker, José Martí. It is a sad thing not to have friends, but even sadder must it be not having any enemies. That a man should not have no enemies is a sign that he has no talent to outshine others, nor character to inspire, no valor to be feared, no honor to be rumored, nor goods to be coveted, nor anything to be envied. I am grateful millions of us had the good sense to elect a man who believes in the greatness of this country, so that it may be preserved at all costs for future generations. Thank you, and God bless you.
I think the politicians are being beaten today. So Mario, give us a good few words, please.
Mr. President, after that one, it's hard to follow. But let me first agree to what our fine senator stated. This community understands freedom, what it takes, the loss of freedom, and your support in this hemisphere, but particular for the cause of our free Cuba and a free Venezuela, is something that we thank God every day for. Number one. Number two, again, this is a community that's very diverse. And Mr. President, one of the things that I never thought I would see, and I was getting frustrated, is finally moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. Thank you for your courage. As you saw, Mr. President, Hialeah is very special. This is a hardworking community. These are hardworking people. These are folks that, again, most of them came from a place where freedom does not exist. They work hard, and they understand that when the federal government takes their money, again, it's their money, and kind of does some things that are not very productive, they understand that's not the way to do it. And you heard it here today. This bill has made it possible for hard-working men and women in places like this, like Hialeah, to keep more of their hard-earned money. And for that, obviously, we're all grateful. But, you know, folks know me as an appropriator, but I'm also on the budget committee. And if you look at where we were, folks, look at where we were. CBO had the forecasts for the next foreseeable future, 10 years, of less than 2% growth. That's where we were headed. That was the new normal. And I think a lot of people may have kind of given up, but look what happens when you cut regulation, you lower taxes, you free up the American people, good things happen. So we're very grateful, and no place in the country is more emblematic of the hard work of the American people and the entrepreneurship that here in Hialeah. Welcome to Hialeah, Mr. President.
You know, Max mentioned something that nobody thought they'd ever see, and that's one-year expensing. The expensing of equipment and other things that you're going to be investing in where you can write it off in 1 year. Nobody thought they'd ever see that, and that's had a huge impact. I think that's even bigger than the trillions of dollars that are going to come back from foreign lands, because as you know, the money was locked out there under the old laws. You could never bring it back in. It was impossible almost. And the taxes were too high. If they did bring it in, it was a very complicated thing to do, but if they did bring it in, the taxes were so high it made no sense. So we have trillions of dollars coming back into our country, but I believe that expensing, a very simple clause that we got in, Marco, wasn't easy, but I think the one-year expensing is going to have a bigger impact than almost anything else in the bill. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yes, sir. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, thank you for inviting me amongst this august group of people. Like Max, my name is Guillermo Díaz Rosero. Like Max, I came to the United States in 1960 from Cuba, also without my parents. The uncles that I came here to visit they were in the camps in the Cuban invasion. So I was here by myself with my brother at that time, which is a story that is very common to all the people here. You'll find that most Cubans have a story, and one thing that you mentioned, and when you were describing Cubans, we're motivated and we're passionate about the things that we do. Continental National Bank, which I'm the president of, was established in 1974. It was the first Cuban-American bank in the United States, the National Bank. I joined Continental in 1976, so I've been there for some time. How your tax cuts have impacted my institution, I can tell you that, and as Secretary of State Steve Mnuchin can warrant, we look at the economy to plan our future. Last year was a very strong year. Most banks not grow 20%. We grew our assets by 20% because of the strength of the economy. I can tell you that we're ahead of the pace on that. One of the things about employment, before you can hire anybody that you wanted because there were so many bankers out of work, not anymore. Now we compete against each other. We have a group of bankers there. We're stealing from each other, and you better pay top dollar in order to get that high, really necessary individual for your business to work with. I want to and our loan revenues are over the top from last year at this point in time. I want to personally thank you, sir, for the actions that you've taken in the world and here in Miami.
Thank you very much. It's very nice. Thank you very much. Thank you. Please.
Mr. President, thank you for doing this here in the city of Hialeah. This is a very meaningful place for a lot of us. Jose Maya, owner of Biscayne Bay Brewing Company. We have a craft brewery actually based in Doral, but I actually grew up 5 blocks from here in an apartment building just down the street. I attended middle school next door at Jose Marti Middle School, and I played on these courts of these fields, and there's so many parks in the city of Hialeah. I'm a proud product of the city of Hialeah Parks and Recreation System. My parents mother Marlene and my father Nicholas Malaya, both immigrants from Ecuador and Cuba. And for me to be sitting here with you today, living out my dream as a small business owner, surrounded with so many amazing leaders and other successful business owners, is a testament to why this really is the greatest country in the history of the world. So thank you so much for fighting.
Thank you very much.
The Tax Cut and Jobs Act has really been just an amazing benefit to the craft beer community. It included a 50% reduction in the excise tax on our beer, which has helped all of us small craft brewers. We're all small manufacturing businesses that are growing, reinvest in our businesses. Biscayne Bay Brewing Company has been able to buy additional equipment, about $100,000 in equipment, also because of other benefits in the tax package that have allowed us to increase our production by 40%. That has led already to 2 jobs being created and potentially another 4 before the end of the year, and that's just one brewery. We have 6,000 craft breweries across the country. So the economic impact of this is tremendous. Then when you look at how that impacts American farmers who sell grain to craft brewers, American hop growers that sell hops, and even companies like All American Container, I saw Remedios here in the audience today, we buy our bottles from them, and they are an amazing success story in and of themselves. So the impact of these laws and your policies have just been tremendously compounding. I think it's important to continue to fight for those issues. I thank all of you leaders that are here that fought the fight in Congress, and also you yourself who went around and sold this important package. Continue to fight, and let's find a way to make some of these permanent. In our case, the excise tax cut sunsets in a couple of years, and it's critical that we just continue to fight for this, continue to fight for economic freedom, and like everyone mentioned, the opportunities that we have in this great country that so many of us our parents didn't have in theirs. It's why, so many of you continue to lead, and it's important that we continue to do this, and we're here to support you. I know Hialeah will always be behind you, but all of us in the business community are incredibly grateful. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you very much. That's beautiful. Thank you. Well, I really appreciate the support that we've had from Hialeah and from Florida, the state of Florida. It was a great victory. It was a big victory. You remember that famous evening, Donald Trump has won the state of Florida. And they started saying, oh, wow. That was a long evening for them. We had a lot of great success. And I think most importantly, somebody actually, not even a friend of mine, said that President Trump has actually produced more than he's promised. And I think if you look at what's happening with the economy, with the regulations, with the taxes that most people said would never, ever be able to happen. They used to call it tax reform. And that's why for almost 40 years they couldn't get anything passed, because they used the word tax reform. So I met with the politicians, and I've only been doing this for like 2.5 years. So I said, what's the problem? How can you not get tax cuts? They said, well, we don't call it tax cuts, we call it tax reform. I said, that's your problem. Tax reform doesn't work, because we do have tax reform, but people don't understand that what we're doing is cutting taxes. We're also reforming, but that could be an increase in taxes. We're cutting taxes. So we go the tax cut and jobs plan. Now, I wanted to call it, they asked me, what would you like to call it? I said, how about, this is after the word reform, how about the tax cut plan? And they thought it was a little tacky. I said, but it gets the point across. But we did call it the tax cut plan. So it was very big. I just want to leave you with this. We lose a tremendous number of jobs and money with almost every country we do business with. And in many cases, our friends are worse than our enemies in terms of trade deals. They're being renegotiated. We're straightening them out. If we don't straighten them out, we're going to terminate them and we'll start all over again. But our country has been taken advantage of for many, many years. Whether it's China, whether it's Mexico, whether it's, I could name almost every country. The European Union, as an example, it's very hard to do business. We lost $151 billion with the European Union last year. $151 billion. It's very hard for us to get our products in, but they send their cars in, like Mercedes, like BMW, and like lots of other things. And we're straightening that out. We're not going to let it go on any longer. We can't let it go on any longer. So you'll be able to send your product in. But Japan and South Korea, so many countries, and it's massive numbers. I mean, Mexico, nobody knows this. We lost last year in terms of a trade deficit $100 billion with Mexico. We can't keep doing this, folks, and we're not going to. So we're renegotiating NAFTA, which was probably the worst deal ever made in the history of trade. But with China, we're at $375 billion trade deficit. So we started a process, and we'll see how it ends up, but we're going to win. You know, I always said we had an imbalance of $504 billion. And I always said, when you're down $504 billion, you can't lose, okay? We lost years ago by presidents and others allowing this to happen. They should have never allowed it to happen. But we're going to bring it back, and we're bringing it back strong. It's already happening. People see it. It's already happening. So I just want to thank all of the people of Florida, all of the people of Hialeah. You are spectacular people, hardworking people. I love you, and we will go on to things I think that maybe our economy and our country have really never seen before. We have such tremendous potential because of people like you. Thank you all very much for being here. It's an honor. Thank you, Matt.
So again, guys, if you are just joining us or popping on to the stream, this is President Trump in his tax reform for small business roundtable in Hialeah, Florida. After this, he is off to his Palm Beach area home at Mar-a-Lago, where he'll be hosting the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe there. So more to come from the president down in Florida, and that is live for you guys there. USA for Business is what the name of this conference was. Let's take it back, though, because I want to take it back into the newsroom for a second and change topics. Today was the Boston Marathon. It's Patriots Day in Boston, a big day, obviously, for that area. Of course, we're remembering the tragedy of the Boston bombing 5 years ago today, but we just had some of the winners announced, and one of the coolest ones is coming out now. This is Desiree Linden. She is the winner of the women's division today for the Boston Marathon. She splashed her way through ice and cold. Pretty windy and cold up there to be the first American woman to win the women's division of the race since 1985. She's a two-time Olympian and 2011 Boston runner-up, and she pulled away at the very end, and she's from Michigan. So a lot of congrats to her again, the first woman since 1985 to win the women's division of this race. So I'm sure we'll hear more about her story and more to come about that, but very exciting stuff to see that because we haven't seen an American woman win that portion of the race. Apparently, she actually had the slowest time for women since 1978, but she pulled it off, and that's very exciting, and a lot of cool articles coming out about her now. All right, guys, coming back into D.C., though, there's another event coming to our video radar right now, and it's being, C-SPAN is actually hosting it on their network, but we're taking it in from the Omni-Shoreham Hotel. It's here in D.C., and it's actually a conference called the J Street National Conference. Some notable faces are going to be there. Senator Sanders, Durbin, Senator Cardin from this area, of course. And the title of the conference is A Voice for Today, Vision for Tomorrow. And it has to do with pro-Israel peace leaders and peace activists who are coming together to talk about what it means today for what's going on in the Middle East and what we've been seeing over the weekend, and then what their vision is for tomorrow. So let's check into that conference. It's happening right in our backyard in the Omni-Shoreham Hotel right here in Washington. Let's check in there.
Very short and limited. And I think that was a missed opportunity because for all of our hand-wringing and justified concern about President Trump's temperament and how he may respond in a crisis situation, he could have played those concerns to our advantage. He could have been, had he wanted to be, demonstrably unpredictable and deliberately unpredictable, and use that to try to wrest a diplomatic opening with the Russians. The Russians and the world at that time didn't necessarily know whether this was an initial salvo or one and done. And had we left that ambiguous and tried to go immediately to leverage a diplomatic opening. I think we had an opportunity there. This time, when the Syrians use the chemicals again, I think we were right to act. I think we were right to act both in a more forceful way than we did last time, but also, importantly, in a calibrated way, because it is not in our interest to see a wider conflict. And we needed to send a message about the necessity of upholding the norm against the use of chemical weapons. But we very clearly telegraphed and very clearly now twice have demonstrated that we are not prepared to use regime-threatening force to deal with the chemical weapons challenge. And therefore, I think our leverage is even less than it might have been on chemical weapons before. The other thing we did, which I think is going to prove an interesting challenge, is to be deliberately ambiguous. You heard this from Secretary Mattis on Friday night and others, as to whether the red line is now the use of chlorine gas, which has happened many, many times over the course of this war and in the last few years, in which case we'll be striking frequently if we keep our word, or is it still the use of nerve agent, which has implicitly been the red line up until now, and we still don't have clarity on whether the attack that we were responding to in Duma was chlorine or chlorine plus.
Right.
So we've now left it to the Russians and the Syrians to guess where that red line is, and we may have put ourselves as a consequence in a bit of a difficult situation.
Because we've essentially said that if this use continues, we're gonna do more. And we haven't.
It's not clear what we mean by this use.
Right.
Is it use of nerve agent or use of chlorine or both? You know.
So you don't think that this limited use of force is going to have much impact in deterring?
I think it will have limited impact. I think I think it was the right thing to do, and I think taking out, in particular, that R&D facility in Damascus is significant because there was a place where the equipment and the precursors and the knowledge was resident. But I don't think, and in fact, the Pentagon has been forthright enough to admit that they don't think that this necessarily precludes their ability to act in the future. And so I think it's a setback. I think it's hopefully a deterrent. I don't think it is necessarily a permanent deterrent, and I think it leaves ambiguous the question of how we will respond to what I expect to be the continued use of chlorine gas.
So let me ask you about the Russian role here specifically in Syria, enabling, maybe even encouraging, use of not just carpet bombing, but chemical weapons. You tangled a lot at the UN with Vitaly Churkin, the legendary Russian ambassador, especially in the early stages of the Syrian civil war. And we were not able to get the Russians to play ball at that time with a real diplomatic process to end the war. What do you think it would take to shift the Russian position in Syria to a place where we could make progress toward ending the war?
Well, I think it's a lot more difficult now, and it was plenty difficult back in 2011, 2012, 2013, to try to make what we called the Geneva process, and you still will hear reference to that from administration spokespeople, yield a real negotiating process. The Syrians never took it seriously. The opposition, when it was at the table, was deeply divided, and Russia's never seemed committed to putting sufficient pressure on Assad to make Geneva yield something. The formula out of Geneva was that there would be a transitional national government that would replace Assad, agreed mutually by the opposition and the government. And Assad never really accepted that, and the Russians never forced him to. Now we're in an even more difficult situation to the extent that the Russians and the Iranians and Hezbollah have gone all in support of Assad. The United States' focus has been, I believe rightly, not on regime change, but on the effort to defeat ISIS inside of Syria and, of course, in Iraq. But that has made the dynamic at the negotiating table that much more difficult because through the use of force, the Syrian regime and its backers have largely suppressed what was a very divided and fraught opposition.
And the Russians now have set up their own diplomatic process in Astana, where
that's a joke. So
there's no Syrian opposition there.
Right.
There are no Arab states there.
Yeah. That's sort of Lavrov PR. So I don't put a lot of stock in that. But at some stage, they're going to be one of two scenarios. Either Assad will remain in power, the U.S. and our coalition partners, along with the Syrian democratic forces, the Kurd-led opposition elements that have helped us take Raqqa and other areas back from ISIS, will still control a substantial swath of Syrian territory in the east and the north, including some of the major oil fields. And Assad and the Russians and Iranians will have a portion of the state, the majority portion, under their control, and no help whatsoever from the outside world to rebuild Syria and enable the return of refugees. That's the scenario that we're headed towards under the status quo because there's no negotiated outcome. The alternative, and here is where I think the United States still has some leverage, is that we say, one, this portion of Syria that is de facto under the control of our allies and partners is going to remain separate and apart with the oil resources unless and until there's a negotiated outcome that meets the needs and the aspirations of the Syrian people as a whole. And by the way, you don't get the resources in the meantime. And by the way, we're staying here, which is a very important piece of this working, not only to help rebuild local governance and local institutions in these areas, but also, frankly, to prevent the Iranians from establishing a land bridge from Tehran all the way to the Mediterranean. So we have that leverage. The other leverage we have, potentially, is the promise that we and our European partners and our Gulf partners will not contribute a dime to the reconstruction of Syria unless and until there is a negotiated political dispensation that results in a government that's chosen freely by the Syrian people. And so again, at the negotiating table, we could potentially play those two cards, which then leaves Assad and the Russians with a stark choice between the rump state with no money and a viable state with international support that doesn't include Assad.
And Trump, in saying that he wants to bring American troops home, he wants to do it within 6 months or as soon as possible, is he then pulling the rug out from under that opportunity?
Yes.
What? Okay.
We'll see if that happens.
We will see.
As he says, we'll see.
So with that, let's turn to an issue that has our partners and friends in the region very, very exercised, and that, of course, is the challenge posed by Iran. Now, when the JCPOA, the nuclear deal, signed by the U.S. and its partners with the Iranians, when that came out, there was pretty universal concern on the Israeli side. But now that the deal is in place, I think it's fair to say that there's a lot of debate inside Israel about the merits of keeping it versus walking away. And yet it looks like President Trump is getting ready to walk away. We have a deadline in mid-May for the latest renewal of sanctions relief. And we're expecting him not to waive those sanctions and, in essence, put the U.S. out of compliance with the deal. So if President Trump goes ahead and pulls the trigger here, pulls the United States out of the JCPOA, it doesn't mean the deal as a whole is collapsed necessarily. But can you walk us through what you think the consequences would be for the United States, for Iran's nuclear program, and for our friends in the region?
Well, let's begin with the facts. The fact is that the deal is working. All of Iran's potential pathways to a nuclear weapon, whether uranium, plutonium, covert, otherwise, have been eliminated, verifiably so. And that is not disputed by the IAEA, nor by the U.S. intelligence community, nor by the U.S. Defense Department. And as you suggested, even the elements of the Israeli military and security services are well aware that this deal is functioning as intended. So we've gone from a situation before the deal where Iran had no intrusive inspections and verification. It was 2 to 3 months away from having the material to develop a nuclear weapon, to today, when all those pathways have been verifiably cut off, and where Iran has committed in perpetuity not to develop a nuclear weapon, and where we will have the ability for many, many years going forward to verify what Iran is up to. If we were to blow that up, and I do think that a U.S. withdrawal would in all likelihood, if not immediately, then eventually blow the deal up, because that means the reimposition of our sanctions that were lifted with respect to its nuclear program. It means that we will be completely isolated from our European partners with whom we worked to get this deal, and with whom President Trump engaged in a flirtation over the last several months to try to so modify, or as he would say, improve the deal. And that has not come to pass. We've not really invested very seriously in that, and we've now got at Trump's side in Mr. Bolton and Mr. Pompeo extremely harsh critics of the deal who've sworn to its destruction. So I believe that what's going to happen is we will, in all likelihood, reimpose sanctions, hence violating our obligations. We will be at odds with our closest allies. Iran will be in a position to say quite truthfully that they upheld their obligations and the United States did not, and therefore they are not constrained by the commitments they made under the deal. That would leave them free if they chose to resume their nuclear program and to pursue it without constraint. We will have lost the very robust sanctions regime that we all worked very, very hard to put into place, that was global in its application. Whatever sanctions the U.S. may reimpose does not mean that our European partners and Iran's other trading partners will go along. In fact, one can be certain that they won't, because they were a means to an end, which was diplomacy. And then finally, we will have done this on the eve of the president's presumed discussion with Kim Jong-un, where allegedly the objective is denuclearization of North Korea, which really does have already a lot of nuclear weapons. It sends a message that the United States is inconstant, that when we sign a deal and it's ratified even by the United Nations Security Council unanimously, we're prepared to walk away on a whim, even when it's being fully implemented. So I think it's a disaster from virtually every dimension. And all it does is strengthen the hardliners in Iran, who didn't like this in the first place. And it means that the other activities that Iran is involved in that we find so reprehensible, its support for extremists, its meddling in neighboring countries, its ballistic missile program, etc., are now potentially able to be augmented by a threat and a potentially credible threat of an Iran returning to nuclear weapons research and potentially production.
So I want to focus in on that point for just a minute, because you hear a lot of critics of the JCPOA say that the sanctions relief empowered Iran in these other activities, in its regional subversion and its sponsorship of terrorism, its support for proxies. But you're saying that the danger of the JCPOA blowing up is that Iran would be able to continue those activities with the prospect of nuclear force behind them.
Quite simply, yes. And without the prospect of global sanctions being reapplied. But I mean, I don't want to take a lot of time on the history, but I would dispute the proposition that the problem with the deal is that it didn't address these other aspects of Iran's problematic behavior. It did not. It was not intended to, nor could it have done so and accomplished the objective on the nuclear weapons. Our primary interest and concern at that time, and Israel's stated primary interest and concern at the time was to deal with the nuclear weapons threat. We accomplished that. That didn't mean that it was all said and done and we could walk away. We still have to confront and push back on Iran's very destabilizing behavior in other realms. But I would much rather be doing that against an Iran that had no potential to obtain a nuclear weapon rather than one that did.
Okay, so you tangled a lot with the Russians. You also got some things done with the Russians, including the JCPOA, including the Security Council resolutions on Libya. But since then, we've seen Russia go beyond some of its aggressive activities in Ukraine and Crimea. We've seen its intervention in Syria, of course, and we've also seen this effort to intervene in democratic politics here in the United States, across Europe, and become a kind of global leader championing the subversion of democratic politics and the reassertion of autocracy. I wonder, you know, as somebody—
It's a good summary, Tim.
it's a brutal picture. But as National Security Advisor, your job was to look across all of these activities and figure out what's the priority. So as you look at Russian behavior today, what really worries you the most? What do you think needs to be our top priority?
Well, when you're dealing with an adversary like Russia, you've got to deal with it on multiple dimensions. You don't have the luxury of saying we're going to worry about Syria but not about Ukraine, or we're going to worry about interference in the democratic process but not about its, provocative activity in NATO airspace. We have to deal with all of these simultaneously, and that's what we endeavored to do in the Obama administration. We dealt with the risk that Russia might try to undermine the territorial integrity of our NATO partners by establishing something called the European Response Initiative, which was a very robust, multi-billion-dollar investment on behalf of the United States in conjunction with NATO to put NATO forces and augmented equipment stocks on the front lines in Eastern Europe to deter and prevent a Russian aggression of the sort that we saw in the early stages in Crimea, Little Green Men, et cetera. We've stepped up our efforts with NATO to deal collectively as well as unilaterally with the Russian cyber threat. We impose very substantial sanctions on Russia with our European partners in response to Russia's behavior in Ukraine and Crimea. And we worked hard, obviously without sufficient success, still to deal with Russia in the Syrian context, not only on the chemical weapons, but also in terms of trying to deconflict our efforts going against ISIS, as well as to try to revive a diplomatic.
All right, guys, we'll take it back into the newsroom now. Thank you for joining us here on Fox 5 Live on this Monday, April 16th. We're so happy to have you. A couple live things obviously going on. That was a live look inside the Omni Showroom Hotel here in D.C. for that J Street conference. Multiple lawmakers, senators, and other leaders speaking about tensions in the Middle East, where we go today, what we look to for tomorrow. But some of the big news items of today, guys, we covered it a little bit earlier. And if you weren't on with us, we're going to replay some of those top stories of the day, including Barbara Bush, unfortunately, dealing with some ailing health. She's 92 years old, and the family announced that she will just be at home now for comfortable care, as she has been dealing with some heart and respiratory problems. So our thoughts go out to that family, of course. And then also James Comey in a tell-all exclusive interview with George Stephanopoulos last night, saying it's possible that President Trump colluded somehow with the Russians, and he actually called President Trump a liar. So there's a lot of talk surrounding those two topics. His book is coming out today, and it's coming out tonight, and there'll be some midnight releases at some of our local bookstores. So we're going to be looking for that and getting some footage in of that later on tonight, like way late into the PM hours. So James Comey, other big news item. Boston Marathon, of course, is today. We saw that the woman, Desiree Linden, is the first American woman to win since 1985, so that's super exciting for them in the women's division, of course. More to come on her. She's a Michigan woman who won that division this morning. And then just some of the extreme weather conditions that we've been going through. I'm ready in my rain gear. It is cold. Pretty blustery this week, but we're hoping that spring finally turns for good coming up shortly in our area. So if you're in the DMV or if you're not, thanks for hanging out with us today on our live stream here in DC. Here's some of the top stories of the day. We'll start with that Barbara Bush story to give you a little more insight as to what is going on with their family.
Barbara Bush is in failing health. The 92-year-old was admitted to the hospital last week. She's recently suffered from congestive heart failure, among other illnesses. Bush has refused further medical treatment and is back at home in Texas with her family. Her focus now is on comfort care.
We're rooting for you to get better, Mrs. Bush, and we know you will because we're all behind you.
Vice President Mike Pence writing on Twitter this weekend, Karen and I are praying for Barbara Bush and the entire Bush family tonight.
She's an example. She's been an example, and she's continuing to be during this period of decline. Everybody faces that, and some people do it gracefully. She's one of them.
Bush's health has been on the minds of visitors to the Smithsonian Museum of American History. An exhibit dedicated to First Ladies includes the dress she wore to her husband's 1989 inauguration. There's even video from that day nearly 30 years ago.
I remember she was quite a force behind the Bush men, and I think they looked up to her for a lot.
She campaigned for her son, Jeb Bush, in the 2016 presidential race. The former first couple did the coin toss for last year's Super Bowl. First Lady historian Andrew Oak is hoping to see more of Barbara Bush in the years to come.
She's a very strong lady with a strong will, and I think if anyone can conquer any type of ailment and health issue, I think it's Barbara Bush.
Barbara Bush is the only living wife of one former president and the mother of another former president. In New York, Kelly Wright, Fox News.
I don't know whether the current president of the United States was with prostitutes peeing on each other in Moscow.
Fired FBI Director James Comey Sunday appearing on network TV to promote his new book, A Higher Loyalty. It hits the shelves on Tuesday. In it, Comey talking about the Steele dossier, an unverified document funded by Trump's opponents, which detailed an alleged encounter between President Trump and several prostitutes at a Moscow hotel.
Did you tell him that the Steele dossier had been financed by his political opponents?
It wasn't necessary for my goal, which was to alert him that we had this information.
In one of many tweets fired off Sunday morning, President Trump criticized Comey about reopening the investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server days before the election.
That she's going to be elected president, and if I hide this from the American people, she'll be illegitimate the moment she's elected.
Trump tweeting in part, in other words, he was making decisions based on the fact he thought she was going to win, and he wanted a job. Slimeball. The online attacks coming as the White House and the Republican National Committee joined forces to discredit the former FBI chief.
The American people see right through the blatant lies of a self-admitted leaker. This is nothing more than a poorly executed PR stunt by Comey.
Comey is expected to make several TV and radio appearances in the week ahead, as a new ABC Washington Post poll says that 48% of Americans find Comey to be more believable than President Trump. In Los Angeles, Anita Vogel, Fox News.
The president's lawyer is going up against the feds. Michael Cohen, the personal attorney for President Trump, is asking a judge to issue a temporary restraining order, claiming some of the documents seized by the FBI during raids of his office, apartment, and hotel room are protected by attorney-client privilege. The raids, reportedly prompted by payments made to Stormy Daniels, a former porn actress who claims she had an affair with President Trump before he took office. Her lawyer was at the hearing as well, asking the judge to make the materials public.
Above all else, we want to make sure that the integrity of the documents that were seized is maintained. We don't want documents disappearing or being destroyed under any circumstances.
Prosecutors say the materials are all fair game, and certain confidentiality rules can be set aside if evidence exists that a crime has been committed. But President Trump is calling the raids and the investigation a witch hunt and, quote, an attack on our country. His supporters say it's proof there are elements of the Justice Department looking to damage the president.
There's a lot of confusion within the DOJ and within that investigation. I think they better get their act together, because it is, the American people are starting to wake up to the ridiculousness.
Severe weather across the country is blamed for several deaths, among them a 2-year-old Louisiana girl. Carly Ortiz was sleeping inside her family's RV when a large tree came crashing down, tearing the mobile home in half. Neighbors heard the father calling for help and knew something awful had happened.
When we heard him screaming, we knew it was a kid. We knew it was the baby. And he was screaming and yelling.
People were harmed when an F2 tornado ripped through central Arkansas. At least a half dozen people were taken to the hospital for various injuries. More than 150 structures were damaged, mostly homes and the University of Central Arkansas.
It could have been worse, like the building could have got torn down or so, but we're able to be alive today, so thank God.
Governor Asa Hutchinson toured the affected areas, praising officials for issuing warnings and residents for listening.
People take it seriously, some more than others, and those that did not take it seriously, I think will do next time.
A tornado in North Carolina is blamed for tens of thousands of power outages. Resident James Bullard captured the dark funnel cloud swirling over Greensboro. The South is clearing up. The Midwest is digging out. Nearly 2 feet of snow fell in Minnesota, forcing flight cancellations and stranding travelers in Minneapolis and Duluth. North of Milwaukee, a carport collapsed, crushing at least 6 vehicles, shattering windshields and leading to a buildup of snow inside the cars. A little up the road, the roof of an Econo Lodge also caved in. Pieces started crumbling onto swimmers using the indoor pool. The severe weather forced officials to postpone 6 Major League Baseball games on Sunday, something that has not happened in almost 10 years. In New York, Chris DeMayo, Fox News.
And that weather, that severe weather all over the nation really is serious stuff, guys. It's a wonder, actually, that our very own DC Eagles are somehow surviving it. They are in the rain, but, you know, they go through a lot more than that. Heavy wind sometimes. And they're doing so well, and they're growing. So we're going to throw up that camera one more time and just leave it there for a second as we transition to the next portion of Fox 5 Live. Sam is up next. She'll be hosting the next little bit for you guys. But for now, we're just kind of looking at our screens, seeing what is coming in for you, whatever is relevant and live. And we have a couple things down the pipeline, I think. So we're looking into what comes up. But breaking news, of course, always takes precedence. So we'll be looking for what breaks, what cameras that we have, whether in DC or around the nation or around the world. For now, guys, I'm Molly. We'll throw up the Eagles again, and Sam's coming up next.
Hey all, this is Sam. I'm taking over for Molly. We were just checking out the Eagle Cam over in Southeast DC. There are two little eaglets that we've been checking in on since they hatched a few weeks ago. They are above the training facility for DC police. This is above the Earth, with the Earth Conservation Corps and with DC police. Sorry. So we were just checking in on them. The camera's been a little out of sorts, and it's kind of a gray day out here in DC. So just wanted to check in and give you guys more of a look at what's going on for today. We are keeping tabs on a hearing in the area for President Trump's lawyer, Michael Cohen. He is due to be in a hearing after the FBI came in and raided his office and his house and several areas where he had documents and other important information. So, and that was in regard to the investigation after allegations that Stormy Daniels, the adult film star, was involved with an affair with the president back in 2006, I believe. We can double check that number for you. But right now, let's see, hold on. The stream is being a little silly. Make sure that you guys can see me okay. Yes, we're good. Sorry. So, again, we're checking in on a hearing that's due to come up. We can see, I can pull it up for you. There's some little microphones on a podium, and someone's going to be speaking. I'm not entirely sure who, but yeah, that's the little microphones right up here. So we can check in and see what's going on with that. Some press have been dropping by and putting in their microphone. So there's a bunch of different things going on today. Besides that, the Boston Marathon went off today, and an American woman has won the women's marathon for the first time in over 30 years. This is Desiree Linden. She is from Michigan, and she won the Boston Marathon, and then a Japanese man won the men's event. So we're checking in on that, and we are also seeing what else the president is up to today. Over the weekend, speaking of DC news and politics, we are keeping tabs on former First Lady Barbara Bush. She was hospitalized. They were tracking her health, and it looks like she is no longer seeking hospital care. She's going to go into comfort care at home, and so we're not sure what's next for her and what her status is, but we've been keeping track of that over the weekend here in DC, and we're definitely thinking about the Bush family and thinking about them and all the great things that they did while in DC and for our country, and as they still continue to do. So that's also of interest. And we can bring up for you the one big story that I thought was really interesting over the weekend was this was the protests and criticism to Starbucks after a manager at a Philadelphia store kicked out two men that were waiting. They were waiting and just hanging out, and there's been kind of a debate of, did they buy anything? No, but they said they were waiting for a friend, and then the cops came in and were arresting them. But as that happened, the man that they were waiting for showed up. So there's been a big controversy because both the men that were involved with the police were black. Of course, Philadelphia is a very diverse city, but it's still, these kinds of incidents are happening everywhere across the country, the South, here in Maryland and DC, and also in Philadelphia, where there's been, you know, a discussion and a very intense one about race and the dynamics behind that. So we were looking at some information with that. Philly, Fox WTXF in Philadelphia is actually reporting now that the manager at that location in Center City no longer works at the store, and this is the same person that called police. The Starbucks did issue an apology earlier over the weekend, and they're looking to they're looking to train their managers for, quote, unconscious bias. So let's pull up the video for you. I thought it was really interesting. There was also an interview that they had, that Philadelphia, that our partners in Philadelphia had. There was an interview with the woman. So a woman tweeted the whole incident. She saw it happen. She was sitting in the Starbucks, and her tweet went viral and has had a lot of attention. And then since then, all these protests have happened. So let's pull that up for you.
Brought some attention to it and sort of opened the conversation so that people who wouldn't normally listen might listen to people who actually experience this every single day. So.
There were a couple of questions about what happened before the video, what's happened, what's in the video is well documented. What did you see before the video as well?
Nothing. They were sitting peacefully. Anybody who says they were confrontational or loud or angry is lying. They were sitting peacefully there, just the way anybody else was.
Have you been here before? Have you ever seen anything like this?
Never. Of course not. Of course not. I mean, I'm not surprised it happened, but you know, incredibly upset it happened. But yeah.
There were several statements from Starbucks that had come out. I think there was a more broader statement where the CEO said it was difficult to watch. I'm paraphrasing there. Are you satisfied with the corporate response yet?
You know what? I told somebody yesterday who I was interviewing with is that they said, "Oh, it looks like you're calling out Starbucks and you're taking Starbucks to task." The truth is, really, it just happened to be Starbucks that day. It's everywhere all the time. And Starbucks is just one example of where it happened, and if it happening in Starbucks and it going viral brings the right attention to it, then great.
Last question. What do you want to happen now? What do you think is the next step of this?
I want people who say things like, there must be more to this story, or maybe they did something, or this never happens, to start listening to people who tell them that this happens and start believing them.
So that was an interview with that our Philadelphia station in Fox 29 WTXF, their reporter Dave Kinchin. He spoke to this woman, Melissa, who took this video inside of the Philadelphia Starbucks and saw these two men being arrested. She said they were doing nothing, and she just wanted to bring attention to that. But since then, there's been several protests, demands for change and people to be dismissed from their positions at Starbucks. But she was saying, as you heard, that this isn't just about Starbucks. This happens in different companies all over the world. A lot of people have been looking at Starbucks for one reason or another, and they thought this is it for Starbucks. But just like different things for Amazon or Facebook or other large companies that people want to criticize. But a lot of these issues can happen anywhere, in a Walmart, in a McDonald's. So I think because of the kind of people that go to Starbucks, I guess it's more. There's populations that are more white versus black, depending on what areas that Starbucks are in. So that can be an interesting discussion about where stores decide to put their decide to put up their locations because of who will buy their products. So that was another interesting bit. There was also some comments from comedian and actor Kevin Hart. He demanded that Starbucks, make changes and, apologize. So that's been another continuing story. Again, as I said a little while ago, apparently this is again Fox in Philly reporting that the manager who called the police, who began this whole incident where the two men were sitting in the store, she is no longer working at that store. Excuse me. So we'll see what happens with that coming up. We are still checking in on President Trump and the investigation with his lawyer, Michael Cohen. He apparently, the AP is reporting that he is seeking to limit access to records seized in the FBI raid of Cohen's office. So they are saying that this stake in the investigation could be getting at the heart of, other matters that Trump is involved with, because, whatever information that Cohen has, whether it be about Stormy Daniels and his relationship with her, or other involvements with Trump, with the Trump family businesses or the presidency, because now they have records that Cohen has, and we don't know what those records are. So we're curious to see what's going on with that. Again, Michael Cohen allegedly paid off Stormy Daniels $130, what was that number? I want to say $130,000. It might be, I think it was around that. But anyway, he allegedly paid her off after a apparent affair between the adult film star and the president, and she was supposedly signed off on something, and now there's been back and forth about whether or not the president signed off on it. So there's a lot of different nuggets going on here. Again, we're checking on that again, and there was also last night a very big interview with former FBI Chief James Comey. He cited that there might be some evidence of obstruction of justice, and he also is releasing a book this week. I am gonna bring up for you, let's see. Let's do a little report about what we were just talking about. If we can get it to play.
Fired FBI Director James Comey Sunday, appearing on network TV to promote his new book, A Higher Loyalty. It hits the shelves on Tuesday. In it, Comey talking about the Steele dossier, an unverified document funded by Trump's opponents, which detailed an alleged encounter between President Trump and several prostitutes at a Moscow hotel.
Did you tell him that the Steele dossier had been financed by his political opponents?
It wasn't necessary for my goal, which was to alert him that we had this information.
In one of many tweets fired off Sunday morning, President Trump criticized Comey about reopening the investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server days before the election.
That she's going to be elected president, and if I hide this from the American people, she'll be illegitimate the moment she's elected.
Trump tweeting in part, in other words, he was making decisions based on the fact he thought she was going to win, and he wanted a job. Slimeball. The online attacks coming as the White House and the Republican National Committee joined forces to discredit the former FBI chief.
The American people see right through the blatant lies of a self-admitted leaker. This is nothing more than a poorly executed PR stunt by Comey.
Comey is expected to make several TV and radio appearances in the week ahead, as a new ABC Washington Post poll says that 48% of Americans find Comey to be more believable than President Trump. In Los Angeles, Anita Vogel, Fox News.
Barbara Bush is in failing health. The 92-year-old was admitted to the hospital last week. She's recently suffered from congestive heart failure, among other illnesses. Bush has refused further medical treatment and is back at home in Texas.
The president's lawyer is going up against the feds. Michael Cohen, the personal attorney for President Trump, is asking a judge to issue a temporary restraining order, claiming some of the documents seized by the FBI during raids of his office, apartment, and hotel room are protected by attorney-client privilege. The raids, reportedly prompted by payments made to Stormy Daniels, a former porn actress who claims she had an affair with President Trump before he took office. Her lawyer was at the hearing as well, asking the judge to make the materials public.
Above all else, we want to make sure that the integrity of the documents that were seized is maintained. We don't want documents disappearing or being destroyed under any circumstances.
Prosecutors say the materials are all fair game and certain confidentiality rules can be set aside if evidence exists that a crime has been committed. But President Trump is calling the raids and the investigation a witch hunt and, quote, an attack on our country. His supporters say it's proof there are elements of the Justice Department looking to damage the president.
There's a lot of confusion within the DOJ and within that investigation. I think they better get their act together because it is the American people are starting to wake up to the ridiculousness.
So that was just a couple of reports from Fox News here, just to give you an update on what's going on with the Michael Cohen hearings, which we are still waiting for, as well as what the investigation is all about. There are a lot of different facets here. We got the relationship between Stormy Daniels and the president. We have the lawyer of the president, who was also involved in a Russia investigation, whatever documents he has, and there's also obviously been the back and forth between the president and other agencies like the FBI and James Comey about what was going on with all of that. And to top it all off, we have the situation in Syria. So it's been a complicated week in DC. So we'll see what's going on right now. And then again, we have some information. This is a report about former First Lady Barbara.
She's recently suffered from congestive heart failure, among other illnesses. Bush has refused further medical treatment and is back at home in Texas with her family. Her focus now is on comfort care.
We're rooting for you to get better, Mrs. Bush, and we know you will because we're all behind you.
Vice President Mike Pence writing on Twitter this weekend, Karen and I are praying for Barbara Bush and the entire Bush family tonight.
She's an example. She's been an example, and she's continuing to be during this period of decline. Everybody faces that, and some people do it gracefully. She's one of them.
Bush's health has been on the minds of visitors to the Smithsonian Museum of American History. An exhibit dedicated to First Ladies includes the dress she wore to her husband's 1989 inauguration. There's even video from that day nearly 30 years ago.
I remember she was quite a force behind the Bush men, and I think they looked up to her for a lot.
She campaigned for her son Jeb Bush in the 2016 presidential race. The former first couple did the coin toss for last year's Super Bowl. First Lady historian Andrew Oak is hoping to see more of Barbara Bush in the years to come.
She's a very strong lady with a strong will, and I think if anyone can conquer any type of ailment and health issue, I think it's Barbara Bush.
Barbara Bush is the only living wife of one former president and the mother of another former president. In New York, Kelly Wright, Fox News.
That was just a recap on what's going on with former First Lady Barbara Bush.
I don't know whether
checking in on her on her health. Again, the family announced that she was being taken out of medical care and is going into comfort care. So we're hoping that she pulls through and we'll see what's going on with that. There was also the Boston Marathon today. I mentioned that a little while ago. The marathon actually posted some video on Facebook. There was a American woman who was the first, well, not the first, I'm sorry. She is one of the latest American women to have won the marathon in quite a long time. So let's bring up what she had.
How does it feel to finally be in the winner's circle?
I don't have the right words. I'm thrilled. It's supposed to be hard, and you know, I just want to thank John Hancock and the VAA for giving me the chance year after year and believing in me sometimes when I didn't believe in myself, and it's good to get it done.
One final question. This is a formidable women's team history. We shouldn't be surprised that a United States woman broke through in the marathon. What does it say about the women's program in marathon here in the United States?
It's on the up and up, and we've had great role models and a big future ahead. I think today there was definitely a lot of camaraderie out the course, and it was who was going to break through, and you know, it could have been anyone's day. I was just very lucky to get it done.
Well, and very, very good. Congratulations. Congratulations. Here he comes. Is it okay for both crying? Is it okay for both crying? Yes.
Those were both the winners from the Boston Marathon today, and this is the 5th anniversary of the marathon since the marathon bombing. So definitely an emotional day, as it will continue to be, just as we have with 9/11, with any act of terrorism that kind of takes its toll on an event there. So those were both of the winners from the marathon. Desi Linden is the first U.S. woman to have won since 1985, and she's a 2-time Olympian, and she was a runner-up in 2011 and pulled away at the Heartbreak Hill to win. Her timing was at 2 hours, 39 minutes, and 54 seconds. And then the men's winner, Yuki Kawauchi from Japan. He is the champion for the men's time, and he is the first Japanese runner, I believe, to have run the marathon. To have won the marathon, I should say. Back in 1985, Lisa Larson-Weidenbach was the winner for that. Before the race began offering money that lured the top international competitors. So the money is what draws all these runners from all over the world. A lot of runners from Ethiopia, from Kenya have been winning often. So it's been kind of a battle between the international countries and the Americans, because obviously we want the Americans to win. So that's a great day for them, and congrats to them. We'll see what's going on next. There's due to be some other festivities in Boston for the day. We can see if we can bring up some other bits for you. We also wanted to talk about, let's see. Well, we're checking in still on the hearing, and then we also had over the weekend, there were a couple little bits and pieces of, roundup news here in DC. We had a new baby gorilla born at the National Zoo. The baby's name is Moki, and he is a Western, I have to remember the name, Let's see if we can bring it up. Where's the video? Let's see, this is the video of the baby gorilla.
Hey, what's going on?
Miss Kalea.
That's the new baby gorilla that was just born. The mom, her name is Kalea, and she is a western lowland gorilla, and just gave birth to her first little baby. The baby's name again is Moki, and the mom actually had to be taught like some little lessons about being a mom and how to care for the baby. So there were some kind of interesting photos. Let me see if I can bring one up for you. But the zoo had said that they helped kind of train and educate the mom, Kalea, on what to expect with the baby. So they gave her a little stuffed animal, and it even had a little recording inside that made some like baby, gorilla baby, cooing noises. And so I think she became, interested in that, and then, learned how to give it kisses and how to be, hi Jeff, how to be, attentive and give it support and care. So I thought that was really, really sweet, and it's been really popular on our website here in DC. So let me see if I can bring up a picture of Kalea with a stuffed gorilla. I thought this was such a cool picture because she looks very interested in it. This is that's the photo of Kalea and her trainer. What's her name? Well, her name is Melba Brown, and she's one of the main zookeepers for Kalea in the primate center there. So that's her with, this is as you see here, that's a stuffed gorilla, and it was playing baby gorilla vocalization so that Kalea, when the baby came, she would know what to do, and they would teach her how to hold it and care for it. So I thought that was a cool little thing. Just like moms would go to class and talk to childcare and baby educators to learn about how to be a mom, because it's obviously a very tough job. So I thought that was really neat. And yeah, we're still checking in on that. Let's see if I can bring myself up again. Hello. We are just checking in to see, still no word on this hearing. I still see the little microphones and no one talking. So we will bring up a report for you. There's a ticket scam going on at Coachella.
Back in September, she has this confirmation email to prove it, signed HTD Tix, with instructions to pick up the ticket at Fantasy Springs Casino in Indio Friday morning.
1 minute, let's bring up. Let's start that again. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
People spending big bucks on these tickets, plus hotel stay and plane tickets, just to find out it's all a scam.
There was no sign that anything like this would ever happen.
Nika Logvanova bought her Coachella Weekend 1 ticket through Ticket Expert back in September. She has this confirmation email to prove it, signed HTD Tix. with instructions to pick up the ticket at Fantasy Springs Casino in Indio Friday morning.
So we got there and there were already a couple people and they all looked really confused. There wasn't anyone who had our tickets. Someone from the hotel came down and they said that the man who had our tickets had checked out yesterday and that he was gone.
The seller no longer replying to emails and the HTD Tix customer service line not picking up when we called this morning.
No one is available to take your call at this time. If you'd like to leave a message in the general delivery mailbox, please do so now.
$700 short and out a Coachella ticket. Logvanova is hoping to get the word out before others fall victim to the scam.
This is just for weekend one. I'm assuming that there's definitely more people for weekend two that have purchased tickets from him that are going to be in the same situation.
Like Gracie Kelly, who bought her Coachella Weekend 2 ticket from the same site and got tangled in a very similar situation.
Some man who was in charge of everyone's tickets just disappeared, and he canceled some hotel reservation, and he just disappeared out of like thin air.
With bags packed and a non-refundable plane ticket from Oregon, she's headed to the Valley next weekend, but likely won't be attending Coachella.
I guess just hang out and maybe something good will happen. I don't know. We'll find out.
If you're going to go somewhere, you know, buy the tickets from the actual website, not some third party, unless it's like StubHub or something. That way, even if it's a little bit more, you're guaranteed a ticket. You don't have to go through all this. You actually can go to your venue.
Indio PD is urging anyone who believes they've fallen victim to the scam to file a report. You could find a link to that on our website. Reporting in La Quinta, I'm Lauren Coronado.
A massive rally held on Monday in Damascus. Thousands packing the Syrian capital to show support for President Bashar al-Assad and the Syrian military, following the latest round of U.S.-led airstrikes. The rally coming as Assad's forces make a big push against rebels in the Damascus suburbs.
What has happened?
I wish people would use it more because I think it's a very attractive note.
Banknote engraving historian and American Numismatic Society trustee Mark Tomasco met us on this sunny 42nd anniversary of the reintroduction of the $2 bill to praise both the aesthetics and functionality of that note and strike down rumors of its demise.
I have one at home in my drawer that I've had for about 20 years.
When I was younger. Not in years.
I have one that I hold. It used to be my mother's, actually.
Americans treasure their $2 bills because we seem to believe they no longer circulate, or they now carry some additional monetary worth.
I know it's worth two $1 bills.
Or the feds no longer print them, or we can no longer withdraw them.
It's fun to try and use them, and I do on occasion. I get interesting reactions.
But Tomasco reminds us more than $1 billion of $2 notes circulate today. The feds still print new ones, and if you want some $2 bills, go to a bank, any bank, and ask.
$2 bill as a denomination goes back to the early 19th century.
When the federal government only issued coins and state-chartered banks produced all of this nation's paper money, Americans also carried $3 bills. Then the Civil War wiped out and reissued all U.S. currency, and the feds started issuing notes.
The legal tender notes of 1862 were the first $2 bills in federal currency.
And those, displaying Thomas Jefferson and his Monticello home, remained in circulation until the early 1960s. The United States then brought back the $2 note on April 13, 1976, for this nation's bicentennial.
To return one of the more historic denominations of U.S. currency.
Dating back to 1817, the painting engraved on the back of the $2 bill represents the oldest engraving on any piece of U.S. currency in circulation today.
The portraits on U.S. currency are very well done. I like them all.
On the Upper East Side, I'm Matt King, Fox 5 News.
So that was a little report on the anniversary of the $2 bill, which I thought was pretty cool. I have a $2 bill from my grandfather, so I wonder if anybody out there has one that they keep too as like a special keepsake, but apparently you can just ask at a bank and get one, so now you can get some more $2 bills. Although we also are, I've seen some other stories about how more restaurants are moving away from cash and using cards only, which is a whole other thing, the debate of using cash versus cards. So, let's see. Right now, let me see what else. I forgot what I was going to say. Again, for those who are joining us, we're just checking in on any outcome or statements from the hearing with President Donald Trump's lawyer, Michael Cohen. He is due to appear today, as well as Stormy Daniels, who is the adult film star who alleges she had an affair with the president. So she is due to appear, or I'm sorry, she has arrived at the hearing. We haven't heard anything from her or from the Cohen team. So we'll see what's going on with that. And we'll check back and let you know for the rest of the evening. Stick with us. We can also, we will also be streaming, if not here, on Fox 5 DC on our Facebook page. We will be live streaming, I'm sure, any comments made from the Cohen hearing. So check back with us on that. Let's see what those Eagles are doing. Oh, one has come back.